Sorry, folks, this is part two. My finger hit the camera, so we'll just have to deal with it. Unfortunately, the lead flight attendant, a beautiful woman, she was sucked out of the aircraft. They never found her or the material that went out with her, because there was some metal or something that went out with her. She was sucked out of the aircraft. What they were showing was simply unbelievable. First of all, they didn't know if the pilots were still alive. So they were literally, the stewardesses were literally going like this: are there any pilots on board? Which is a refreshing way to carry things on when you don't know what's going on and they're talking about they need a pilot. That's not a good sign. So the stewardesses could not get to the pilots. They couldn't communicate with them. Everything was chaos. The winds were nearly 300 miles an hour, and they were 40 degrees below zero. Even in Hawaii, at 35,000 feet, those winds are very cold. You can ask the bomber pilots from World War II, and they didn't go up that high. They went pretty close, though. I think they got up to about 28,000 feet, though, sometime. And then that's, it was sub-zero all the way. So the pilots finally were able to communicate with each other. There was a mountain range that they were heading for, of all things, and they needed to come down. They could not stay up anymore. So they had to take a chance, and they didn't know what the condition of the plane was. They didn't know what was going on. It just sounded like a bomb went off. So the pilots had to take a chance. The first officer was a woman, a good pilot, and she was flying the plane, it just so happens, and they couldn't hear each other. Finally, they could hear each other. The scope of this was finally seen by the woman pilot, because she's sitting here and the pilot is sitting here, and she's on the right seat, and she looks over and she's looking at the aircraft, and she's seeing the sky, and you could see her. This isn't live, they did a reenactment of it, but she goes like that because there was no plane. The plane, part of that plane was ripped off. So she was looking out into the clear blue yonder. So they went down to, I think, about 10, 11,000 feet so that the passengers could breathe. But the plane was creaking and moaning and banging because only the floorboard remained in the middle of the aircraft. It's, I'll put a link to it so you can watch it. But go check it out, the Aloha Air flight. It'll tell you everything you need to know. And the passengers were under the firm belief that they were going to die. I did not know the pandemonium and chaos of the, I heard about it, I knew about it, but I did not know about the 300 mile an hour, minus 40 degree winds. And I did not know, I knew that they would, once they breached the fuselage, it was no longer pressurized. Once there's a hole in it, then you're at the temperature outside, or, the atmosphere outside. So the pilots decided to try to land at the airport, and they did their best they could to go around the mountain. So they could not believe it that they were able to get that plane down, and somehow the electric knocked out, they knocked out some functions. So I'm not sure that they had any hydraulics, which is what they used to steer. It was compromised in some way, and they wanted to use their the things that slide down, that they, when on takeoff, they slide these things down. I forgot the flaps. That's why it's real long when you take off, and then as it gets up, they take them up. Those are called, they're slats. And they wanted to put them out, but they were afraid because of the shaking of the aircraft, and they thought that the piece was going to break right off at any moment because it was wobbling and all of that kind of shit. The passengers all thought they were dead. Truly. Not for a minute or two, but this went on for like 17 minutes or 14 minutes. It was a long time. And they finally got down, and then they decided to put the landing gear down. And wouldn't you know it, the front landing gear, it showed that it didn't come down. It didn't come down. So what they were going to do is do a flyby, have somebody tell them on the ground, is the front landing gear down? But it was impossible because they knew that the plane could break apart at any moment. So they just had to try to land it. And fortunately, when they got close enough, somebody with binoculars thought to look and tell them that they called the tower and they said, tell the plane they've got a, I don't know if it's locked, but they've got a front landing gear. Because if the front landing nose gear did not work, that was death to everybody on the plane, because it would have broken up, or because it was so fractured anyway, it would have broken up and it would have created a fire. They had a lot of fuel on board as well at that time. And the pilot was a big, tall, white guy. You could see the people. If you watch this, you could see the passengers coming up and hugging him and shaking his hand and all of that. And the woman too. The woman was just as much remarkable. But they couldn't believe it because they really didn't know the extent of what was going on. And I think they were given a real big award for that. However, in defense of the attacking authorities, they found out that plane had very sketchy maintenance. They were actually inspecting it at night. The FAA were requiring inspections of the skin and so forth on the plane and the motors and all that, but they were able to keep it off their flight schedule and put it in at night, and they missed things, and this is what happened. It's probably better that I went to a second video. The plane was an early variation of a 737. The way they made the skin was that they connected it with rivets, which is a hard punch, and then you know what I'm talking about with rivets like that. However, rivets can travel right through the skin, so you need something more than just rivets. And what they did was they put a nice layer of epoxy. And don't laugh, because some of the bridges in the United States right now, more and more, are going to epoxy to hold together the beams, the cement beams. When you drive your car over there, it's not being held by nails or clamps. It's being held by glue. That's becoming more and more a feature of bridge building now and other things. It's very strong. So that was also put there as a redundancy safety measure. On top of that, they had one more. They had what they called, I'm trying to remember what they called it. They were like bands. They were like cloth bands, but they were very strong, very strong. Gore-Tex, like that kind of stuff. And they were bands. And they traveled across the whole fuselage. And theoretically, a hole, if it developed, could not grow for more than, I think it was 40 inches, something like that. It was a big square. And they had these bands, these Kevlar bands that were heavily reinforced. And those traveled the whole side of the aircraft on the skin inside. Thereby, the biggest hole that could be experienced was around a 40-inch hole. I think that's what it was. And then they would hit the series of these bands, and it would not be easy to break the bands. And that's the redundancy that they used on the 737s when they used the epoxy glue. And there, I may be missing something there, you know. Oh, I am missing something. After the fact, when the plane came down, they saw tiny little fractures that could not be seen at night with a zoom microscope. They were small, but they were stress fractures, and some were tiny, some were growing. And that was the same kind of action going when the woman went into the plane and she saw the tear in the skin. So they still don't know what happened, but there are a couple of theories, so you're in one of two camps. I was wrong, because on the Biffle aircraft by Cessna, the 550, I was wrong. It was not the compartment that opened up. At least it doesn't appear that could be, because the pilots never made mention of it, according to what I've heard, and you know, that's what I've heard, including the NTSB report. And they experienced this problem when they were on the ground. So unless they were on the ground doing 105 miles an hour before they got up in the air, maybe. But it sounded to me like they knew it when they were on the ground taking off at the beginning. So it looks like that's now out. So my record for this is not good. And I was convinced that was what it was. But it wasn't. It was something else. The impossible turn, going back to an airport when you lose an engine. They call it the impossible turn. You don't have the currency, altitude currency, to give up the height of a turn. You can't do it, not with one engine. Because you lose 80% of your lift. You lose 50% of your power, but 80% of your lifting going upward force. So that all came into play. Now, they did all sorts of investigations on this. And it came down to the shoddy inspections. There were plenty of stress fatigues from the rivets and other things, but the rivets especially. And the two camps on this is that it was the poor maintenance and a combination of a buckling, which led to a catastrophic tearing off of the top of the aircraft, a good chunk of it. And they said one thing with the other combined to make that happen. And then, remarkably, I can't remember in what year it was, but they brought in a police officer of all things. The police officer was a blood expert. He was the kind of policeman that could dismiss a person from being guilty of a crime because of blood splatter. He was an expert supposedly, in blood spatter. Now, I believe it. They've solved many murder crimes because of blood splatter. It's a very unique thing. It's very unique, and it's very hard to get right, but is it helpful when you have a problem? And this is hard to believe. Hold your stomach when I tell you this, because it's not pleasant. The one fatality was a woman who was sucked out of the aircraft. To this day, the blood expert police officer believes that the flight attendant was the reason that the plane went into a catastrophic situation. I didn't understand it at first, but as they explained it slowly, I could understand it. They had these bands, these Kevlar bands, that were very, very strong. And you could not bust more than about, maybe it was 50, 60 inches of a hole. You couldn't do it because the bands were that strong. And what they found out, according to the blood expert cop, is he said that when the flight attendant was taken out of the aircraft, she did not experience blood loss until she was out of the aircraft. because there was blood on the outside of the aircraft. There was not blood on the inside of the aircraft. Why is that important? Because the police officer said that the woman, it's called liquid power or something like that. I forget the name, a liquid something or another. And what happens is, it's like a soda bottle. When you open it up, if there's a lot of bubbles in it, it puts a lot of stress on the bottle, but the bottle handles it. It doesn't get massive stress on the bottle. The bottle can contain it easily. But they said that the poor woman's body, when a hole was created there, it was a small hole, and that her body came and broke through it, thereby creating the massive catastrophe that happened. Other people in the other camp think that it was a combination of things not related to the woman going out of the plane, but just all in effect together. But I think I come down on the camp that says, I think it was the woman's body, because it got sucked, and that's what happens when you get a hole in the aircraft. You just go out with it unless you're pinned down. And remarkably, everybody was wearing their safety belt. Remarkably. Were they not? Because the stewardesses were the only ones that really got violently hurt. The people all wore their safety belts. That's incredible. So when the flight attendant that lost her life got sucked out, her body got stuck and caused pressure buildup massively for a moment, and then it exploded the roof off. They cannot come to agreement on that, but I think I have to fall into that camp. The passengers were suffering, and the 300-mile winds, and I just did not know all about this. I heard about it, but I never really investigated it. I thought, basically that it came off, they lost their hats and wigs, and then they kind of said, what is going on? And they landed. They did not. Those people lived with the thought of death occurring at any second for 14 minutes or 16 minutes. It's unbelievable. So now you know the story of Aloha Air 737. I forgot what flight it is, but they'll show you the picture of the plane and how the pilot should be given a Medal of Honor, in my opinion. And the people were tough people too. They did a good job surviving it. Anyways, folks, take care. That's my two-part story tonight. This one did not glitch, thank God. Subscribe, be nobody. I will occasionally give you these interesting stories, and I think this was an interesting one. I did not know that the people had such a harrowing experience. That was 48 minutes of that show, and it was worth every minute of it. Take care, folks. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.